Live? Yeah. Man Yisrael is live from Congregation Levi Yitzchak. Here we are. Okay. Does it look like you have a full picture of me, or my head is out of a minute? Okay. The cup has to be in there as well.
Put it down a little bit.
Up, you mean?
No.
What do you mean down? I'm good.
Too much.
Too much headroom? It's good. Leave it as is. Okay. Shkoyach, everyone. Thank you. Everybody's live. You're live in front of the entire world. Okay? You're not in the picture, but back here it is. Okay. Very good. Thank you. L'chaim. L'chaim l'bracha. My good friend. Refuah Shalema for Rabbi Reichik. Okay, everyone. So this week's shir, let's get right to it. Let's not waste no time. This is going to be a continuation to what we had discussed in the last 2 weeks. Being, as I mentioned, the Rebbe spoke about this idea in 3 weeks consecutively. We were talking about the idea of Moshiach's revelation. Does that happen like an all-in-one powerful shot? Is there just this revelation, or is there some kind of a stages in that revelation? We spoke that in 57, 52, in Tafshin Nun Beis, the Rebbe made a stunning statement in Parshas Vayera in the winter, in Parshas Vayera, and following that week, Parshas Chayesara, and following that, Parshas Toldos. The Rebbe made a stunning statement then that not only is Mashiach existence in the world, but Mashiach has revealed himself already. We have already the revelation of Mashiach. We discussed the idea of what can that mean? What is that? What is the content of that revelation? That was mainly the discussion in the last 2 classes. What can it mean, a revelation, if the Geula isn't really here yet, the redemption is not here yet? What does that mean? So we had discussed that in Mashiach's revelation itself, we brought the idea, the Chassam Sofer, followed up by the Arizals, that there is a process where the inside process of how Mashiach gets sent. Rambam gives us the observation from the outside. When we are observing things as an outside observer, we have to see certain actions that Mashiach does, and then we can confirm him being Mashiach. The question, however, is how does Mashiach know himself he's Mashiach? That's the internal question. Not to the outside, from the inside. Now, we might not know that unless we trust this Mashiach already, and for whatever reason, we can confirm it based on him telling us, but that's a different story. So halacha, rabbanim, so on and so forth, they have to follow the facts on the ground, if we might say. Facts on the ground is Mashiach has to check off a certain checkoff list, and only when he gets everything done can we confirm him as absolute Mashiach. But when does Mashiach know that he's absolutely Mashiach? That we said is the Chassam Sofer says that Hashem is going to communicate to a person who's a human being, who's a tzaddik, and as we discussed, there is a Mashiach standby. In every generation, there has to be someone who has to be ready. He's worthy to be Mashiach, and if the time comes, if it's just the right moment, then Hashem speaks to him, reveals him that he's Mashiach, and sends him, similar to Moshe Rabbeinu in Mitzrayim.
So why can't we say one thing I missed last week, 2 weeks ago? Why can't we say that it goes according to all of Rambam, and then when the people say that he's Mashiach, like Rabbi Kiva said about or whatever it is, and if enough people or whatever, saying that's when he relates.
Because Mashiach is elected by the Eibishter. Mashiach is not elected by the people. The Rambam is not telling us, meaning his main appointment. The Eibishter appoints Mashiach, but yes, there is once he's a melech, part of his malchus is that the people appoint him in the sense that Saint Tassim Alech melech, the king, people accept him. But Mashiach, you can't have elections and choose Mashiach just because we decide. In other words, the person that the Rambam is speaking about that does all these messianic acts and gets all this done is because he is being sent by the Eibishter to do that.
Right.
So that's what the Chassam Sofer is saying. Where does that all start? At Mashiach's end. I'm not talking about at our end. At our end, when we see certain things, then we should gather around him, and then appoint him as Mashiach.
Is able to do all.
Yeah, but why is he able to do that?
Then he realizes
because he got it done.
Because he got
So it seems like
Navi.
Yeah.
How we know he's a Navi because his words come out.
But how does he know? No, because God speaks to him.
The neighbors came to him.
Yeah. No, but you're saying how come Mashiach doesn't get when he affects all these pulas, then he realizes that he's Mashiach because he got it all done.
Right.
Obviously, in order to have the oimets and the what we call the courage and the confidence to be able to do all of that, especially to go and build the Beis Hamikdash, you're not going to do that unless you know you're appointed by the Abel. You need to have God backing you. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Basically, even though, let's put it this way, even though Rambam is talking about something that doesn't require a shinoi min hagay shel olam, you cannot learn the Rambam completely dry as a natural phenomenon. In other words, even the Rambam, who gives you a process, is a process that is fueled by a divine energy from behind it, because the list is an impossible list. If you have your Kabbalah, no, but the Rambam writes differently. That it's Geras HaTeiman, the Rambam speaks of a Mashiach that can be totally spectacular. Yeah. But I'm seeing even the Rambam's natural Mashiach has to be somehow integrated with some divine force, because this is to accomplish the gathering of all the Jewish people, knowing the anti-Semitism and knowing the opposition, and knowing what it would take to build the Beis Hamikdash, and knowing what it takes to get Jews on one page. And I'm not, you're talking about all these inyanim are so outside of the normative. So we would like to learn the Rambam as just a natural procedure, but you can't see that. So there has to be some divine infusion that's fueled by a charge by the Eibishter that Mashiach knows absolutely that he's the one. Obviously, but you can ask the question, Bar Kochva obviously did not get that charge, because if Bar Kochva would have gotten that charge, then he would have not missed in the end. If the Eibishter would have sent him, then he would have not missed. So Bar Kochva started doing these things. So I think, first of all, when Bar Kochva set out on his mission to start fighting, I am not sure that Bar Kochva was doing it because he presumed he's Mashiach. Bar Kochva was the Jewish people. The Jewish people were suffering so terribly under the decrees and so on and so forth, that Bar Kochva said enough is enough, and he gathered, and he started a campaign. At some portion in the campaign, Rabbi Akiva, who's working from the outside in, not from the inside out. I mean, Rabbi Akiva is a big tzaddik and could be a navi and this kind of thing, but that nevuah necessarily is that not coming, and he has to judge it based on what he's seeing. He's seeing some of the qualifications that the Rambam is speaking about. Not to its very end, because he didn't say he's Mashiach Vadai. He said, we can assume him, we can follow him, we can go after him. Yeah, that's what we have to say.
Well, we don't have any place that says that Bar Kochva said that he's Mashiach, do we?
I think the Medrash says that he himself. I'm not sure. I don't know. Okay, let's go back over here. We did.
Why couldn't you say about Bar Kochva that he was appointed, but the Mereg Bavos, as Rambam says?
Mereg Bavenoisav, once the Eibishter sends someone, and to be the Goyal, I don't think it's Shaykh Mereg Bavenoisav. It should be interrupted after there has been the Shlichus. Mereg Bavenoisav is Shaykh on a potential Mashiach, but whatever it is, it's not Shaykh. In any case, back to what we're saying. So last week we had discussed this idea, and the idea, the concept that we brought out last week is that there is a revelation that Mashiach has to himself. Before he reveals himself to the rest of the world, he has confirmation from above as a Navi that he's Mashiach. And especially we added the idea that he's infused with the neshama of Mashiach. And once that's infused inside of him, the higher levels of Mashiach, in other words, he is a Mashiach candidate, but then he's upgraded to incredible godly powers. And at that moment, and from there begins, so we brought from the Arizal, that initially he recognizes, but the world doesn't recognize. And then only at a later stage, he's recognized by the entire world. That's the idea. Now that in any way doesn't in any way conflict with Rambam. What I'm saying is that this idea that Mashiach's kind of internal process, Rambam is not talking about the internal process. The Rambam is looking at the outside. We were looking at it from the internal process, seeing it from Mashiach's and what's going on. My question today is a little bit more clarification on the idea that you can have Mashiach or being sent by the Eibishter to be Mashiach, and in a sense that is already referred to as Bias HaMashiach, that Mashiach came because he was already sent to bring the Geula. And yet, is there a Torah understanding that In other words, does this happen spectacularly in a way where Mashiach is sent and immediately there is just utopian godly revelation in this world and no one can stop him? He's the unstoppable Superman. Or can this still involve a certain process that happens afterwards, in a sense that there is no geula and there's no redemption for quite a while? Is there, in other words, is intrinsically Bias Mashiach and geula one thing, or geula means redemption? Geula means Jewish people. The world is not suffering. The Jewish people are definitely not suffering anymore. Do the two come at the same time? That's what I want to discuss today, because the Rebbe in Parshas Toldos, as I mentioned earlier, the Rebbe in the Sikh of Parshas Toldos again explained that there is two levels of Mashiach. This idea that we discussed from the Arizal, the Rebbe is kind of hinting to it in this week's Dvar Malchus Sikh, where the Rebbe says there is the Ruach Shel Mashiach and Oirei Shel Mashiach. The Ruach of Mashiach means that Mashiach himself is imbued with that soul of Mashiach, but that is to himself. It's not. Ben Oyer means his countenance, his light that is shining outward. And the Rebbe explains that idea of his light shining outwards means his activities that he does, which through that we identify him by the means of what the Rambam says, by the pa'ulis that he does, the actions that he does. But before that is that in order for him to do these actions and for these actions to have atzlacha, for them to be successful, especially since we spoke earlier that these are just monumental accomplishments. These are totally, the greatest accomplishments any human being has ever done. For these things to happen, there has to be the divine power behind them. So the Rebbe is saying that the Ruach of Mashiach first comes into Mashiach, and then we have the Oirei Shel Mashiach. Then we have his light. His light is all the details of the Rambam, the Kibbutz Nitchi Yisrael, all that. And obviously, it's possible that to a certain degree, the Pa'ulis that Mashiach does in terms of getting the Jewish people ready for the Geula doesn't necessarily only start when the Ruach Shel Mashiach enters in. In other words, someone who is designated to be Mashiach could already even before that has been triggered from above, could already, I'm saying no, because from the Rebbe's mashma, that the most of the pa'ulas that he does, for example, Yilchel Mechames Hashem, until he's menatzeach, at least the Rebbe starts by that one. Yaakov Kol Yisrael, the Rebbe is not saying that is happening after the Ruach Shel Mashiach enters in. But the Yilchel Mechames Hashem fighting the wars, I'm saying, he's had a Yehuda.
He's there already.
No, but
he's the one in the generation.
Yes, but that's worthy. I'm talking about there's two Yanim over here. There's a person who's always worthy. That's the Metzias of this individual. The Rebbe says that we have this Gal's Metzias, a Metzias that was there already before. That's a different thing. Yes, 1 second. Obviously, that has to start from when he's very young, before anything happens, that he's a tzaddik for himself. I'm talking about his pu'ulis with the Jewish people that have a certain Mashiach flavor. In other words, someone who is taking responsibility for the Jewish people as a whole, and turning the Jewish people towards observance. Is this something that, at which point does that start? After he gets the communication from above that he's Mashiach, and he knows for certain and that's why he sets out to start Yaakov Kol Yisrael, that he starts getting Yidden to influence Jews to Kiyam HaMitzvahs, to compelling Jews to doing Torah and Mitzvahs and the like, Chazek Bitka, to start closing up the breaches? Or is it something that happens like this? Because Mashiach is a born leader, like we discussed last week, right? In the earlier classes we discussed that Mashiach is a born leader because he's born at everybody that comes from David HaMelech has that kind of royalty in his blood. So he has it kind of as a potential within him. So therefore he feels responsibility even before the Eibusher has ever communicated with him. He feels a certain responsibility to the Jewish people because like Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was not designated to be Moshiach of the Jewish people until he stood by the burning bush. Yet we find from when he was a little child, he right away has leadership qualities. When he sees a Jew being beaten, he's the one who steps up. When he's sitting on Paro's lap, he's already pulling the crown off Paro's head. In other words, because he's destined for that, there's a certain energy already that he is exuding, that he's giving forth, that's showing that he's designated Lamalchus. And he feels it to a certain degree, because if this is his identity, if this is who he is, obviously he will be doing things like that. So the Rebbe over here is saying an interesting thing. At which point does Mashiach receive the mandate from above to actually be Goyal Yisrael? At which point in the Kiyam Harambam, in the checklist of the Rambam, at which point does this slip in the confirmation from above that he is Mashiach? So here's in the Sikha, the Rebbe says that the Ruchai Shel Mashiach starts, the spirit of Mashiach enters him, which the Rebbe says the Iker Inyan of Bias HaMashiach. The main idea of Mashiach has arrived, the Iker Chiddush, the Bias HaMashiach, is the time when he is confirmed to himself that he is Mashiach. Okay? So this Inyan of Bias HaMashiach, at which stage in the Rambam's checklist does that happen? So the Rebbe seems to be saying that it happens before he's really doing these magnificent actions, worldly actions. Definitely before he builds the Beis Hamikdash. Definitely before he concludes Yakabetz Nitche Yisrael, before he completes Kibbutz Goliath, which are the two things that are necessary for him to be Mashiach Vadai, to be definitely certainty Mashiach. So that only happens, definitely, the Rebbe says, after he's already imbued with Mashiach's neshama. But how about the first things that the Rambam says? That there is a person who's a very charismatic leader. The Rambam refers to this individual Yamoid Melech, that a Melech rises. The Melech we decided is not a Melech with a crown. He's not a Melech that is halachic king. Because if he's a Melech with a halachic king, how do you have a Malchus start Bisman Hagolas? Who is anointed? You can't be Mamana a Melech. You can't appoint a king only through a Navi and only through the Sanhedrin. All that is not in place during the time of Golas. So the Yamid Melech means you're talking about someone who has a huge follower, leadership, and people obey him like a king. Which means people obey him in a way that he gives a pekuda. In other words, he has royal qualities. He's not people that people are falling to the floor before him and bowing down and Adonai HaMelech. That's not what the Rambam means. That's for sure. The question is his next few pa'ulas, which he does with the Jewish people. What does the Rambam says? The Yaakov Kol, he's oisik b'mitzvahs kedavid aviv. Obviously, he doesn't start being hoige b'Torah, meaning studious in Torah and oisik b'mitzvahs, when the Eibusha tells him he's Mashiach. Obviously, he won't be Mashiach unless he's a person who's oisik b'Torah, the Yaakov Kol Yisrael. He's a tzaddik, he's a ish kaddish, he's a very holy Jew, he's a huge tzaddik who studies Torah and does mitzvahs. For himself, we will all understand that's before the divine communication. How about his communal work? So it's interesting when the Rebbe says that his pu'ulas, his actions, happen after his ruach, the spirit enters him, the Rebbe only mentions k'moi yilachem milchames Hashem, fighting the godly wars. Now I think but he doesn't say regarding, the Rambam puts this as number 3. Yilchem milchames Hashem, in the Rambam's checklist, it's number 3. In terms of his communal actions. I'm not talking about his own personal virtue. The Rambam says Yaakov Kol Yisrael, Yaakov Kol Yisrael, and he's Mechazik Bitka, which means he's working on breaching the breaches. Oh, so then it comes to Muhammad Hashem. Okay. It's a class on its own. What Muhammad Hashem? But here's the thing. We understand that Yilchem Muhammad Hashem v'yenatzeach, okay, which means fighting the godly wars and being menatzeach really means, what does it really mean is that there is no more opposition in the world that's stopping the Jewish people returning to Eretz Yisrael and building a Beis Hamikdash. In other words, why do you have to fight? Why does Mashiach have to be a fighter? Why does Mashiach have to be a fighter? Actually, David HaMelech was a fighter, and that disqualified him from building a Beis Hamikdash because his hands were bloody. So it's not intrinsic that Mashiach has to be a fighter. The reason Mashiach has to be a fighter is because the Eibusha created a world, the world until Bias HaMashiach is a world that is not happy with the Beis HaMikdash, and it's not happy with the Jews in Eretz Yisrael. That's just the situation. So hold on. So in order to get to that, he's going to have to remove the obstacles. Now, those are things that we understand that being able to accomplish that, we can. Again, I wasn't even planning to talk about any of this today, but I'm just making this assumption with everybody over here that Yilchem Mechames Hashem, and especially V'yanatzeach, so that he should be able to reach a total victory, that there is no more opposition for him to going up on the Temple Mount and building the Beis Hamikdash and gathering all the Jewish people to Eretz Yisrael, which means claiming Eretz Yisrael as Jewish land and no one butt in over here. In order for him to do that, we understand that requires a far greater divine power. So for that he's imbued, Hashem, and the spirit of Mashiach enters him, and he has this incredible godly abilities that are completely, that are very, very super powerful. Maybe that's why the Rebbe is only starting with Yilchim L'Shamas Hashem. Yaakov Kol Yisrael, technically, the idea of Yaakov Kol Yisrael, we can say more b'derech hateva, if you have a good activists and so on and so forth, that you can reach a state where you can compel the Jewish people. Even though you might argue that compelling Jewish people to do one thing might be even harder than that.
Well, once there's to be in that say,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the big deal for building the base?
No, that's no big deal. That's right. It flows. It flows. No. I no. No, but what happens if it gets all done, but for whatever reason he aborts right then and there, and he quits. I don't know whatever happens. He doesn't reach. No. Yeah, you're right. You're not saying is the right. That's it. But it's still not done until.
Do it.
1 second.
But there's already no opposition.
You're right, yeah. But there's no. Hold it. But here's the thing.
The question that I have is the Rambam does not define what does the Yinatzayach mean, unless he means when he builds a Meis HaMikdash, then we know that he is.
No, Al Pi Pashtus Yinatzayach means against all those who want to stop the Geula. And what's stopping the Geula, the restoration? The Rambam defined what Moshiach's business in this world is. What's Moshiach's business in this world? The Rambam says Moshiach's business in the world is the restoration of the Beis HaMikdash and returning the Davidic kingdom and bringing back Shleimus, the completion of Torah mitzvahs. Okay? So, which requires a Beis HaMikdash and it requires Kibbutz Golias. It requires the Jewish people to be in Eretz Yisrael. Two things that are required. So the Yilchim L'Chamas Hashem is to remove all obstacles that will prevent that state. The desirable state is we have a Beis HaMikdash, we have all the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael ready and inspired to keep Torah mitzvahs. So then you have it. Anything that's blocking that is part of Mochamas Hashem. So it doesn't, in a sense, it doesn't only have to mean non-Jews who are upset that Jews are taking the land of Israel. It can also mean within the Jewish people, those that are stopping observance, those who are convincing Jews not to be observant, those who are coming along and saying being Jewish, different movements within the Jewish people that are anti-Kiyam HaMitzvahs, anti-Torah. So he has to win over all of those as well and eliminate their thing. Okay, let's learn because we got to get moving here. Okay. My question today really that I want to deal with is the concept of Bias HaMashiach versus Geula. That's the question. Bias HaMashiach versus Geula. So here's a very important piece from the Sfas Emes. Okay, the Sfas Emes not in his Sefer on the Torah, but Sfas Emes in the Gemara, the Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, in the first chapter, in the first parak, on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis. B'Tishrei Asidim Ligos, the bottom piece in the first column, the Gemara B'Tishrei Asidim, B'Sefer Turei Oven, Mefalful Bekam B'Sugya De Erevin. In the Sefer Turei Oven, he has a pilpul, he has a whole discussion regarding the Gemara Masechtas Erevin. Hanoide Miyayin B'Yom Sheben David Ba. If someone makes a vow not to drink wine the day Mashiach comes. In other words, he's afraid. He's afraid that traditionally, Lubavitch, as we know, that when Mashiach will come, there won't be a single drop of alcohol left in anywhere. So we stack up because they won't be able to fight because with the Chaver will go as it's going to be Yom Shekulei Mashke. This guy's afraid that if he gets stoned during that time, he's going to miss all the action. So he makes now a neder that the day Mashiach comes, he's not going to touch any alcohol. Okay, that's probably the motivation. I'm trying to wonder why. Or maybe he's a guy trying to quit alcohol and he can't. So he figures at least when Mashiach will come on that day, I can say I quit. Whatever it is. So again, he's marech. I didn't look up the Turei Oven. I didn't get to look that up. But he's the Sfas Emes is not happy with what the Turei Oven, was a Pirush and Rosh Hashanah, says. He's not happy with him. The Milsa de Pshitahu, it's a very simple thing. The Be'emes ben David l'chud v'geula l'chud. The Sfas Emes is over here differentiating between Bias ben David. And what we're talking about, Yom She ben David ba, the day that the son of David comes. So what does that mean? So the Sfas Emes said that does not mean that the redemption is here. It doesn't mean that we're all flying in the clouds and coming to Yerushalayim. Okay, why? Shaharei, and he proves that. Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom b'olam Mitzrayim koydem ha'geula. Moshe Rabbeinu came to Egypt, came to Mitzrayim before the Geula happened. Now, we'll soon see how dramatic that idea is, meaning how similar to a situation that we can identify with it was with Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, how painful, actually dramatic, I mean to say the opposite, how painfully slow and frustrating the process can be. Moshe Rabbeinu came to Mitzrayim as the Redeemer, as the divinely appointed Redeemer. He came to Mitzrayim, and yet the Geula happened at a time later. We'll see when in a minute. Kamoi Kain, so the same idea, says the Sfas Emes, it's possible. First, he starts off that it's a possibility that the future redemption will also be that there is first a bias Moshiach. The Ben David arrives. There is a bias Moshiach. Moshiach has arrived, but there's no Geula in sight. There's no redemption in sight. And he says, "V'chein mevur b'midrashim." Not only it's possible, not only doesn't it mean that Mashiach came and suddenly, wow, the whole world is metamorphosized in a split second, and we're all dancing and singing in Yerushalayim with the Beis Hamikdash. He says it's possible. These are two separate things. Geula is one thing, and the arrival of Mashiach to the Jewish people is something else. He actually says it's stated explicitly so in the Midrash. Just like the first Redeemer is revealed and concealed, on the bottom of the last line on the first column, so to the latter Redeemer. And therefore, in other words, the question over there is, I guess this is what the Torah of, and I didn't prepare. I'm going to make an admission. I didn't prepare this the way I would have wanted to. I was in a little bit of a tumult today, but what I do want to say is I'm getting now a little bit where he's heading at. Again, it seems like that he's dealing with the question that that if someone makes a neder the day that Ben David the Bab not to drink wine, the day that Mashiach comes, he's not allowed to drink wine ever. So he's asking a question. There is a machlokes in the Gemara if Mashiach comes in Nisan, if the Geula comes in Nisan, but Nisan asidin li'goil or but Tishrei asidin li'goil. So if we're going to say either one, if we say it's Tishrei or Nisan, let the person drink wine. If he says in Cheshvan let him drink wine, and in Tavis let him drink wine, and in Tammuz let him drink wine, because all these. Let's say, they suffix you don't know, question you don't know, but 10 months of the year you can drink wine. Besides a Tishrei or Nisan, you might be cautious. But yet we say that he's not allowed to drink wine ever because what can happen? Ben David could come. So that's the Turei Oven is kvetching, trying to answer the question. Okay, wait. That's also discussed. The Sfas Emes is saying, to me, it's not a question at all. Because when the Gemara discusses if it's going to be in Tishrei and Nisan, it's referring about the Geula, the redemption is going to be in Nisan. That could be in a period after Mashiach's Ben David Ba. Ben David Ba comes at an earlier stage. Like we see by Moshe Rabbeinu, he came, and then the Geula didn't happen. And not only is he bringing that the Geula didn't happen, but even more than that, the Goel, the Redeemer, disappeared. Moshe left town. He came here, created a mess, and then he was gone for a period. Oh, okay. So I'm going to get to that. So based on this Sfas Emes, which is a very, very important distinction, Geula is separate and Bias HaMashiach is separate. The Sfas Emes is basing it on Mevur b'Midrashim. He says it's Mevur, so it's Mevur in Medrash. We're soon going to deal with, I'm going to get to that in the end of the class, can this concept be consistent with Rambam? Again, right now we're not discussing, let's put Rambam on the back burner, Rambam's process of Mashiach for a moment. A Sfas Emes over here comes and tells us that what? That the process of Geula has to be separated, Mashiach's arrival and the Geula, the redemption and Mashiach's arrival, two separate things. And they can happen at two different times with a period of time in the middle. He brings medrash. It's always good to look things up in the source. Let's take a look in the medrash that he's referring to. Medrash Shir Hashirim on the pasuk Doim Medoidi Litzvi. It's the next page. Doim Medoidi Litzvi. It's in Perek Beis in Shir Hashirim, Seif Chav Beis. Let's learn. You see, skip the first two lines. Doim Medoidi Litzvi. Okay, you see the third line. I didn't get a chance to underline it. Doim Medoidi Litzvi. Matzvi, just like a deer. Nida is seen, v'choyze v'nichsa, and then it gets hidden again. V'nira v'choyze v'nichsa, and then nira, you see it again, v'choyze v'nichsa, and then it gets hidden. Which means if you're in the woods, you're hiking, and you suddenly see a deer. Deer don't usually like hanging around people, and so they're very shy. So you'll see the deer, and then suddenly they're gone. And then, or you're having a little, you're sitting down for lunch, and you see it over there. Then turn around, you see him over there. So he's appearing from, and in between there's some kind of a hiding. This that we're saying, doime doidi litzvi, doidi means the beloved, and it's referring to the Redeemer. So to the Redeemer appears, and he's gone, and he appears again. So kach, so too the Medrash says, Goyal Harishon, the first Redeemer, who is Moshe Rabbeinu, Nira was revealed, the Nichsani was concealed. And then he returns and he's revealed again. So by Moshe Rabbeinu, he came, he disappeared, he came as a redeemer, which means he was visible to who? Visible to all the Jewish people. What did he do? He brought the message of redemption. He came pakad pakadati. He said the redemption is here. He brought the Besuras HaGeula. That's really what he came. The Besuras HaGeula, he came and he delivered. The Besuras HaGeula means the news that Mashiach is about to come. That news he brought, but then he was gone. V'kama nichsemehem. How long was Moshe Rabbeinu hidden? Reb Tanchuma Omar Gimel Chadashim. Rabbi Tanchuma says 3 months was the period of time that Moshe Rabbeinu was gone. From the end of the era to the beginning, the end of Shemois to beginning of the era was a 3 months lapse. They encountered Moshe and Aaron. According to the Medrash, it was a period later. Now, why were they so angry at Moshe and Aaron? It wasn't because, when they met Moshe, they started yelling, and Hashem should do bad to you because you messed us up. It was after a long period of suffering. Because it didn't happen the next day. Moshe comes to the Redeemer, they wouldn't have started up with him so quickly. Problem was that Moshe skipped town. And they were suffering all the time that Moshe skipped town. Then suddenly he's coming back again. So they said, here's the guy, the Saras maker. He came, he delivers, he told us he goes to Parai, and since then, it became, the Golos became so miserably dark after he left, so they were angry at him. Yehuda Berabi Amar Lekirsin. I don't know what that is, but then he continues. Kach Goyal Achrein. So too the latter Redeemer, Nigla Lahem, will be revealed to the Jewish people. And then he will be concealed from them. How long will he be concealed? Mem He Yomim. Medrash says a very short period, even less than Moshe. For 45 days. So there is a concealment on Moshiach. He's here, disappears for 45 days, and then he comes back at them. And he brings a pasuk, and then he says, Ashrei HaMachake. He brings a pasuk in Daniel. Fortunate are those who really waited out. Fortunate are those who wait out to the end for this extra time. Rabbi Yochanan ben Ketzar to B'Shem Rabbi Yoina Amar Elu Mem Hey Yoim. These are the 45 days that he's hidden. It's going to be a very crushingly difficult time for the Jewish people during the time of the concealment.
What's this? The Yom Melech.
It's a pasuk. That's a pasuk in Daniel that's talking about the Zman HaGeula, how long it's going to take to the Geula. That's what it gives the kates. In Daniel, when it gives end time, he gives you a certain cheshbon. Okay, but in the end there's some extra. So what's the extra? The extra is after already Mashiach is here, there is an extra period slapped on which Mashiach is concealed. And the Medrash says something interesting. Va'oisen hayamim, and that time Yisrael koitfim meluchim v'sharshei doisam va'oichlin. The Jewish people are eating salty stuff. In other words, and as the Medrash in Yalkut Shimoni, there's another same idea is discussed in Yalkut Shimoni. It's basically saying that a lot of people leave Mashiach during this time of concealment. They get frustrated. They don't see him, so they get very frustrated. Those who hang on to him are going to eat bitter herbs. That means it's not going to be an easy time. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a very tough thing. That's what it says in Medrash. I want to share with you to bring this idea stronger. The Ramban in the end of Parsha Shemos, where the Ramban is talking about why did Moshe Rabbeinu complain to the Eibishter. I don't have the Ramban in, right? Don't look for the Ramban. I didn't give you a copy of the Ramban. The Ramban focuses very strongly in the end of Shemos, not on Mashiach, not on the latter Redeemer, but on the first Redeemer. The Rambam is trying to explain how come Moshe Rabbeinu seems so out of character that he comes back to God storming with such a complaint. The Ramban was having a hard time with that. The Eibishter sent him on a mission. Okay, a little patience. What's this? The Ramban says that Moshe Rabbeinu was sure that once he comes to Parai, yes, he figured the Eibishter told him already Parai would give him resistance, because part of the problem was the Eibishter told him there will be resistance. But Moshe Rabbeinu expected that Parai will challenge him. He'll right away make the sign that the Eibishter told him to make to Parai, throw it in front of Parai, will become like a snake. Parai still won't believe him. And the Eibishter told him, I'll give you the makkah of dam, blood. So right away, bang, the Eibishter will appear to him and the makkahs will start. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu was expecting a very consecutive geula. He's arriving to the Jewish people. He's telling them, he goes to Parai, and he's sure the fireworks will start immediately. But that was not what happened. The Eibishter left him in the dark. There was no communication even. Moshe was kicked out of the palace. Coming back, he hears the news. He's reading the newspapers. He hears the horrible news, what's going on in Egypt. The Jewish people are suffering, and he is not getting divine communication. And the Eibishter disappeared also from Moshe. So as a result of that, Moshe was getting, come on, you can't do this. I'm expecting the redemption to roll out, and all we got is just a mess. And Moshe has no idea how long this is going to take. No one told him a timeline. So because of that, he was frustrated, and that's why he cried out to the Eibishter, Lama Ra'oisa. That's what the Ramban says. The Rabbeinu Bachaya draws the parallel based on that idea. He draws the parallel also to the future, to the Goyal Achim, but with very powerful words. Let's take a look at the Rabbeinu Bachaya. Again, this is you can. It's the last Rabbeinu Bachaya in Parsha Shemos. We're not going to do with Vida on page 17. See, it's in the second column, almost to the bottom, the last quarter of the page. Vidaki in Yonei Hagolas Hazeh. The live. Vida, yeah. The line begins with the words v'soivlim, and it's the words vida is a little larger. It's like 10 lines from the bottom of the second column. Vida kin yonei agolos hazeh. You should know that the matters of this exile harishain remez le'inyan golosenu. This will be similar to the future redemption. Zeha achron. The first redemption is a clear indicator for what's going to take place in the latter redemption. She'amnu oimdim by b'shibud v'yisurim. We are in this exile. We are suffering a lot of subjugation. We have a lot of pain. It's supposed to be Aram or Edom. We are waiting for God's salvation. This idea that we're frustrated and we cry, Mashiach is not here. This David HaMelech was talking about it. Before the first base of English was built, David HaMelech is expressing this pain, this frustration. We wait for the morning. We're waiting. Shem al-Maikar means people who are waiting for daylight, and it's not happening. Mamtinim, but he says, this is just stopping over here is enough for this entire class. We need anything else even to continue. David HaMelech is describing, what does it say twice? They're waiting for the morning. It means that their hopes are dashed again and again and again and again. Who can't identify with this idea that we wait and we expect it? Who didn't expect 2 years ago Pesach when everything was shut down? Mashiach is walking through the door, and yet who didn't expect a Nun Aleph and Nun Beis when the Rebbe was there? That Mashiach is coming out, it didn't happen. So this Shemim Laboik, and the Medrash says on it, Mamtinim v'choizrim umamtinim. They wait and they get frustrated, but they wait again. V'im tis'acher ha'geula lavoi. And if it takes longer, this is all to add great reward. In the end, it will be much better. And here we have the famous story of the Ruzhiner, where the Ruzhiner says the cholent will be much better the longer that it cooks, but how long can you wait? So the Rabbeinu Bachai is saying if it's delaying, it's only because it's going to be better at the end. In any case, and also to whack those that are giving us sorrows, to give them a bigger punishment. Here's the most powerful words. And just like we find that the period became very, very, very difficult B'Mitzrayim, in Egypt, from the time the first Redeemer came, the suffering became much worse. That from the first Redeemer came already before Paroi. He came with the word of the Eibishter. He asked for Paroi to redeem the Jewish people. The avoda became much more difficult. The work, and the anti-Semitism that happened in Egypt suddenly was ratcheted up, and it became much worse. Turn over the page, and it became much worse than what it was before. So it will be in this redemption. After the latter Redeemer will be reveal himself. The animosity of the people in the world against the Jewish people will become much worse. Shibud al shibudam, and their pressure will continue and become worse and worse. I want to make note of one little thing. Israel was always under pressure of certain outside whatever, so on and so forth. But do you realize when Oslo happened and the Intifadas happened all in Nun Gimel and Nun Dalet? It started. Clinton organized a handshake between Arafat and Rabin, and that's when the three Intifadas all took place in the 90s, all right after this Nun Aleph and Nun Beis. The Rebbe points to Moshiach being here already. The Rebbe is pointing to the Nisim of the Geula that started already. And right after that, and anti-Semitism. And then you have 9/11 and the ganze Verschwarzung, what's going on? It's mind-boggling. He says, V'yiyah HaGoyel, and that's number one. And he says, in addition to that, not only would it get bad, but the Goyel, the Redeemer, will skip town, just like that. V'yiyah HaGoyel Nigla, and the Redeemer will be revealed. V'choyzev v'nichsan, he will be afterwards concealed again. Kedei lahatos es ha'akom, in order to deceive the nations. Ulahakshos es libam, to give them the chutzpah. Shekei matzinu begulus Mitzrayim, shenigla Moshe v'choyzev v'nichsa mehem. Now Moshe Rabbeinu, and again, my personal idea is, it says by Aaron HaKohen, that when did Amalek come and attack? The Gemara, the pasuk says, it's because when Aaron HaKohen passed away, the Anana Yaakov left, and they didn't have protection. It says Vayishma HaKnani, and Rashi says that the Knani wasn't the Knani king; he was Amalek, and he came to attack now because he figured now they don't have the protection anymore. So again, my own theory, I'm not saying this from inside, is that immediately after Gimel Tammuz, that's when this entire Oslo and the United Nations and all this, they felt that they all know subconsciously, they knew that there's one tzaddik who's protecting the Jewish people. Everybody knew that. Everybody knew that the protector of the Jewish people is sitting in 770. And once they knew that, according to them, they felt it's a hefgewelt and they can go for the kill. And he's kind of saying that to give them encouragement for the wicked and whoever it is to go and put up a fight. And wait. So he brings over here, it was 6 months. I guess either he had a different Maimer Chazal or he had a different Girsa, I'm not sure. We had 3 months. Here he brings that Moshe Rabbeinu disappeared for 6 months. After 6 months of him being out of town. Same idea, that Tzvi is revealed and concealed. Will be revealed and concealed. Because it's going to be similar. Like it says, well, I hear this. I think those who are having a hard time, especially now with Corona and with a lot of the stuff that are going on. There are Jews suffering tremendously in different countries and lockdowns and stuff like that. I mean, thank God we were spared a lot of it, but in a lot of places it's mamish mad. And he says these words. I think there's a very big nachama. V'kasha yiskarev hakates, and as it gets really close, tiyana tzaris rabois u'mischaskois. There will be a lot of tzaris, a lot of problems. V'hu siman ha-Yeshua Yisrael, and that's actually a sign of the Yeshua. Chenom b'medrash, whatever. Anyways, this we saw already. We were yaitza. We don't need any more of it. But I'm just saying that this is so it says. Al kopanim, what do you have over here? You have over here Rabbeinu Bechaya, a very strong idea. This concept that, and this is what the Sfas Emes is saying. Geula is a different story. You can have Bias HaMashiach, which means you can have Mashiach has come already, and yet you don't have Geula yet. I do want to make a note immediately right now. I don't like quoting this because it's a painful thing. Rashi says the same thing like this Medrash. Rashi in the end of Masechtas Daniel. Rashi brings this idea that there is a period that Mashiach will hide after he's revealed. Rashi, you can look at the last Rashi in Sefer Daniel. Sha'asid mishichenu lehiskasois. These are the words of Rashi. Sha'asid malkeinu mishichenu lehiskasois. Our King Mashiach will be concealed after he will be revealed for the first time. And then Rashi says, Elu. Rashi says before that, Rashi also uses the number 45. But Rashi says 45 years. For some reason, and he brings a proof from a kaler. So Rashi gives us, what the Medrash says, 45 days. Rashi says 45 years. Now, where Rashi took the cheshbon 45 years, I don't know. And Rashi just says it on the pasuk, Ashrei HaMachak. The reason I don't like saying that is obviously we don't chas v'shalom to hear 45 years. But I'm just showing that the possibility that people have that there should be a duration of time after the Gilui of Mashiach. The Rebbe says in Parshas Toldos, the Rebbe says that Bias HaMashiach, the Ikar Chiddush of Bias HaMashiach happened already, because the Rebbe said the Yizgalus of Mashiach was already. And yet, to have a period of time that we've been through, no Geula, no, just more suffering and tribulations and ones that we've gone through, it doesn't make sense that someone should be able to accept something like that. So the concept of Mashiach being revealed, concealed, and we're not getting into the subject if that concealment could mean passing away. That's a discussion in which we will have one of our things. So I think in all these things, if we learn the Makairis, we realize that, hey, it's not so simple the way people just dismiss things just out of emotion. We need to know the subjects. I'm not getting into that. Just the concept of him being revealed and out of the picture and then being revealed already is very clear. Now, the question is, if you're looking at Rambam, the Rambam's halacha procession of Mashiach, is there any room for that? For this idea that Mashiach, that Mashiach disappears. Is there a possibility that Mashiach disappears in the middle of that process? In other words, because when you're learning the Rambam, you might argue that you're watching a person who is this enormous successful person and goes from success to success, because the Rambam is describing Yamid Melech, the Yaakov Kol Yisrael, and it's
interesting. Before he makes us stop by going and say,
B'cheskas Mashiach. Yeah, and you can, so you could learn it. B'cheskas Mashiach is a pause, or you can learn it in a sense. You can argue and say, why did he even have to kind of stop with that? If Mashiach is in such a role and he's moving, so just wait till he's Mashiach Vadai, and why do you even have to talk about this B'cheskas Mashiach? Let him finish it, the whole thing. Obviously, I think the simple answer is at a certain point, when you're watching this process, there is probably some kind of an obligation on the Jewish people to join along this effort. And I guess the B'cheskas Mashiach is kind of the signal. Like Rabbi Akiva, that's what the Rambam says about Rabbi Akiva. He followed Bar Kochba. He campaigned before him, and he pointed, Dein Malka Mashiach, this is Mashiach. In other words, to get the Jewish people to rally behind him. Once he's Mashiach Vad and he builds the Beis Hamikdash, he doesn't need our help. The idea that we're rallying behind him and we're supporting him is something that happens kind of at the time of Cheskas Mashiach. Hold on. Now, I just want to say one thing. I want to skip the next page for a minute. I made you a copy of a very important page. We're going to skip this for a moment. I'd like to bring you to Likutei Sichos, page 105. You see in Parshas Re'eh, page 105, there is a Orah 74, and on the bottom of a Orah 74 there is a star, and a bottom beneath that there's 2 stars. So we're going to go into this footnote on footnote that the Rebbe puts down over here. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole Shakla V'Tari over here, just to this point. Ein lachriach the Harambam svirale the Shas didon. You can't prove that the Rambam holds that our Shas loy svirale doesn't hold the Mashiach Yizgala v'Yistar. L'chora, you can argue that the Rambam does not hold of this whole idea that Mashiach is possible for him to be here, and then in the middle of that process, kind of take a pause, take a break. Achakach. And so the Rebbe says you can't be Mashiach. Why? Because the Rambam brings his raya v'al yal al dat chosher Rebbe Akiva omer olav bekaziva shu hamelech haMashiach. Ki, the Rebbe says, ki ben koziva nistater meshech zman b'ma'orois b'meshech milchamtei. The Rebbe learns that even Bar Kochva was not fully present the entire time. Now, the Rebbe seems to be saying this just kachoye bezmanoi bezdin smuchen benegele biyasoliyo. Okay, the Rebbe taking this idea that Bar Kochva was kind of he was in the game, and then he was kind of hiding, and he was out for a while. Probably from maybe who wrote about Bar Kochva? Yosifin. Yes, could be Yosifus wrote about Yosifin wrote about him. I'm not sure.
For sure that he was hiding in the cave, so he found things.
Okay, so you go. So we had artifacts of it. But Al Kaponim, the Rebbe says. So you see the Rambam and yet, but that did not in any way. And the Rambam is using Bar Kochva kind of as a prototype for the possible of Moshiach. So the Rebbe kind of slips in over here that the concept of and that this is not necessarily a jam-packed continuum, but that there could be a break in the middle when there is kind of nothing happening, no action in the middle. The Rebbe is kind of accepting that in Rambam. I'll share with you one more because I really want to end the shir because I don't want to take you so much time, but I do want to mention one more interesting Rishim over here. And the subject, we're going to... the Rishimas Kataris. This is the page that I had before this. Rishimas Kataris. They printed a sefer Teiris Menachem. You know, Teiris Menachem are all the Fabrengen. After they finished all those Farim, they printed a kunteris called Hoysafis Teiris Menachem. And there were certain things that didn't make it into the initial Ichus. They either found it later or whatever didn't make it in. This is the first entry in that sefer of Teiris Menachem. It's a note that the Rebbe wrote. So the Rebbe writes a very simple question. The Rebbe is asking the question. Since Eliyahu Navi has to come before Bias Mashiach because he's the Mavasar Geula, Ayin Seif Malachi, so it says Beferish in the Pasuk, and Erev in Mem Gimel where it says that Eliyahu Navi comes and announces the Geula. And Rambam Malachim Yud Beis Beis. The Rambam mentions that the Navi will come, but the Rambam says we don't know exactly when he comes, before or whatever. Nera Hadvarim. That's one of the things the Rambam leaves very vague. But Al Kaponim, he does mention the concept Nera Mepshutin that Eliyahu Navi comes. How could they have made the mistake on Bar Kochva to be claimed because Eliyahu Navi didn't come? How do we even start the process? In other words, until you don't have confirmation of Eliyahu, then you can't. So how can you assume someone is Mashiach if you don't have an Eliyahu Navi coming and pointing to him? So the Rebbe says, "V'yesh loymar." What's the Rebbe's answer? Let me finish with this. Yeah, without an Eliyahu Navi, Eidos on him. V'yesh loymar. The Rebbe says something very interesting. The Eine Butter Berizal Yoin Bias Eliyahu B'diuk. Where Eliyahu enters into the Mashiach process is not clear. In other words, he's definitely a player, but at which point does he enter the picture is not clear. Maybe the Rebbe says, Koidim Gilui Harishain de Mashiach. Maybe it's before the first revelation of Mashiach. Oy Koidim Nitzchainoi b'Mulchama. Or maybe Mashiach could arrive and reveal himself as Mashiach, and yet Eliyahu Navi is not here. But before he completes his final victory, Mashiach is going to fight wars. After he's revealed like he's Mashiach, he's going to fight wars. Before he completes that final victory, Eliyahu Navi will come and say, tomorrow or next week or whatever is going to be it's going to be the oi, and then he says or oi koidim sheyoidu boy hakoil, or maybe much later. In other words, after he's already winning and he's doing before everybody admits that he's Moshiach. In other words, obviously he can't come after everybody already knows it, because what is he coming to say? Oi koidim sheyoidu boy hakoil ki yoytze boy. What you see from here in the Rebbe's Ha'ara is that you see clearly in this little footnote that the Rebbe is seeing that Moshiach's appearance in the world is coming through. There's a Giloi Rishon. There is a Giloi Rishon. There's a first Giloi, and then there is and at a later stage, which fits what we learned in the Arizal last week and the last 2 weeks, that there's only a later stage when everybody is comfortable with him, when anybody kind of puts their support behind him. Because they thought it's his Gilui Rishon and not necessarily that he complete the Indian. Okay, we'll stop over here. I wanted to share a few other things, but this is I'm talking about the idea that even if we're saying the Rebbe, this ha'ara over here. Yeah. I saw it somewhere. I didn't.
And you were Makasha to the share. Wow.
I don't know, maybe I even saw some.
But you thought about it for paying the share.
No, I knew about it. Yeah. No, you can keep it. Okay, everyone.
Mitzrayim, they stopped working 10 months before the actual Gula.
But they stopped working, but that